Well, hey everybody, welcome to episode 191 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mumey. Really pleased to have you with us. Hope that you're having a great spring or spring break or start of the study process into the July exam, or just sort of catching your breath after the February bar exams. I know we've got people in all of those situations who are listening, and we're glad to have you with us today. If this is your first time on the podcast, we want to welcome you and let you know that you can watch or listen to this podcast. If you'd like to watch, just go to celebrationbarreview.com/191. That's the episode number. And you can watch the entire video of today's episode. And you can also check out past episodes as well. And if you are interested in listening to the podcast, you can check it out on iTunes or on Spotify or on iHeartRadio. So lots of different choices. Just search for the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. No matter how you found us, we're glad you're here with us. We come to you every Wednesday talking about what's new in terms of the bar exam. Well, last week's episode 190, I talked about sort of a remake of a podcast I did a few years ago called The Hero's Journey. And I talked about coming back from the triumph or the trial or the test, in our case, the bar exam, and the steps of reintegrating yourself back in using the hero's journey, the classic tale of how heroes go through the cycle of becoming heroes. And it was really well received. And the original set of podcasts that we did on this were also well thought of and well received. And I wanted to take that episode, last week's episode, and focus primarily on the process for returning bar students. In today's episode, what I'm going to do is circle around to the beginning and take the first 6 steps of the 12-step process that Joseph Campbell created in his classic study called Monomyths. And we're going to look at how that applies to bar students. So if you're just starting out in your studies or thinking about starting and taking the bar exam, you're going to want to stick around. I think you're going to find a lot of insight in terms of just the parallels between classic heroes and bar takers. Not something you might have thought of, but I think they're actually pretty much the same. So stick around for that. We'll get to that in just a moment. Now, before we do that, I want to let you know that today's episode is being brought to you by our special free webinar. It's called How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. This is a look at the powerful, proven way to pass. We'll be offering this webinar live this Thursday, which would be March 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And during this webinar, I'm going to be presenting to you the 4 steps that successful bar takers follow. We've presented this information to literally thousands of people over the past few years. It's been life-changing for so many folks, and I hope you'll join us for the presentation. I'll be doing a live Q&A, answering your questions, giving you case studies, showing you step-by-step what you really need to do in order to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Now, you do need to register, but it's really simple. Just go to celebrationbarreview.com/webinar to sign up and grab your seat. Or if you're watching this video today, just scroll down the page and you'll see the button there, and you can click and sign up that way. Now, if Thursday at 7 p.m. doesn't work in your schedule, we have the same information, the same webinar available in an evergreen format, so it's an on-demand way. Just click the on-demand button. You can schedule your own time to watch the webinar. The only difference, of course, is that I'm not there live to answer your questions, but you can email me as you're watching or even when you're done, and we'll be glad to respond to you. But it's got all of the same information, and I really encourage you to check it out. If you're trying to figure out how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam, this is a webinar you absolutely don't want to miss. Well, let's jump into today's message. We're going back to the very beginning of Joseph Campbell's Monomyth, and you might have heard of it. It's fairly well understood and it's well read. Essentially, it presented the structure of the classic hero in literature and their journey. It's got 12 stages, as Campbell analyzed it. And you might be familiar, if not from his book, which was called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which I think was sort of required reading for most people in college. But you might know this from Christopher Vogler's The 12-Stage Hero's Journey. Both of them basically are saying the same thing. Now, if you've never heard of any of that, that's fine. It does not really hurt you at all. But it's really very simple. think of Star Wars or The Wizard of Oz or Indiana Jones or more contemporaneously Wonder Woman or Black Panther. Think of almost any mythic hero's journey and you've got the 12 stages. And to me, starting out, getting ready to take the bar exam is a good place to compare and consider that process. Now, I think it's important to think at these steps, particularly for people who are just beginning, because I think that if you think about this, you'll see that there is a structure, not only to the classic hero's journey, but to the journey that you're about to embark on. And I say that because right from the very beginning, the first step of the hero's journey is what's called the call to adventure. Does that sound familiar? This is when a hero gets a call to action. It's a requirement to save the peace of their community or a threat to their safety. It may not always be a traumatic event, but ultimately it disrupts the hero's ordinary day-to-day living, and it presents this challenge or request that has to be undertaken. Now, most of you who are listening today or watching and are considering or ready to take the bar can think back to the moment when you recognized or realized that you were going to have to take the bar exam. For some of you, it was an obvious outcome. You were going to law school. Maybe you are going to law school right now. You know you'd eventually finish and you have to take the exam. For many of our listeners, though, it's probably not quite that easy. You were moving along in your life. Things were going according to plan, and then life happened. Something happened in your life. Maybe it was a change in your marital status, maybe a change in your living arrangements, maybe it was a change in your employment or what state you wanted to live in. Maybe it was a health problem for you or something I see often, someone else in your family. Maybe it was a career change. Suddenly you found yourself left out of a job that you thought you'd have for a very long time. Maybe it was just, it's on my bucket list. Whatever it was, there was for most of you, and is right now for many of you, a call to adventure. Now, one of the interesting things that happens to me is that I often get a chance to talk to people at just about that moment when they've received that call to adventure, and they're still very tentative and very concerned about what that's going to mean in their lives, and rightfully so. And maybe that's where you are right now. There's a general sense of anxiety that comes along with this embarking on something so big and so perilous and so stressful. And for some people, and in the typical hero's journey, the next step is literally called the refusal of the call. That's really the sense of fear that you're just not going to be good enough. I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I don't have the right resources. And the problem that you have in front of you of passing the bar might seem like it's too much to handle. And so the comforts of what you know are better than the perilous road ahead. And for many people, this is a real thing. They look at the bar exam, they read what's online, they see what's in the newspapers, they see what's being reported and talked about at the water cooler, and they see what's involved when they go online to apply and fill out the forms and get their software downloads, and they look at the travel cost and the study cost and the cost of a bar review, and they say, nope, that's not for me, I just can't do it. And that's okay. And if that's the conclusion that you've reached, then you probably aren't listening to this podcast. But I suspect this is a self-selecting audience, and you've gotten through all of that and said, yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to push through all those fears. Maybe it's my age or my background or the school I went to or what's happened to me in the past. But I now have this call to adventure. And while there is a momentary sense of refusal, or more likely for many people, a lingering sense of procrastination, it's something that you've now ready to deal with. And I want to talk about this idea of procrastination. When I say momentary, for some people, momentary means a decade or two. I routinely talk to people who say, I took the bar exam for the last time 20, 30, 40 years ago. Wow. Right? That's a big weight to carry around for all those years. And so what that means is that refusing to go back and take that test that you failed or the test that you never took just becomes too great a weight. And at some point, people choose to take the call. And maybe that's what happened to you. You got to that point and you said, you know what, I've just got to do this. I've got to get past this block in my life. And because of that, you move to the next step in the process. You went past a straight up refusal and you went to the next step in the hero's journey, which interestingly enough to me is called meeting the mentor. Wonder what you mean by that, Jackson. Well, let me tell you. if you get past that point of refusal, that point of procrastination, if you're thinking, wow, this is tough, it looks really difficult to do, I've seen the pass rates, I've seen the statistics, how am I going to do this on my own? Some people choose to forge ahead on their own. That's not a very successful strategy, candidly. In order to be successful, I think most people need guidance, they need direction, and they need a mentor. But there's different levels of mentoring. I mean, for some people, just having a step-by-step process like our course is absolutely all they need. But even within our course, there are people who want more than the step-by-step process. They want the personal hands-on touch of a teacher, of a mentor, the person that gives you that extra boost that you think you might need. Now, in the hero's journey, this can be an object of great importance. It can be an inside look into your dilemma. It can be wise advice, practical training, self-confidence. I'm blessed and grateful at all the comments and notes and gifts that people give me as we go through this process. For over 25 years, I've led literally thousands of people through this journey, and I've been greatly rewarded and greatly blessed by their gifts back to me. Now, to be clear, I've never asked anyone for a gift. I've never asked them for a note. I've never asked them for anything. It's not expected. So it's always a nice surprise. But I can tell you that my home and the walls and the bookcases you see behind me are literally filled with artwork, cards, books, notes, letters that have come to me over the years from students who said, you mentored me, you helped me, you guided me, you taught me through this process. You provided me with insight. You helped direct me and teach me. You showed me how to write passing essays and performance tests. You showed me how to take the multiple choice exams. You taught me photo reading and mind mapping and so on. And then a few people said, you even kicked my butt a few times. But in all cases, what they said was, I think I'm wiser and better off for the process. You see, meeting your mentor can be a really important thing for many people because it lets you up what you're doing. It lets you go a little bit deeper. Now, if you're someone that struggled with accepting the call because the process looks so hard to you, because the hurdle of passing the bar is so great, I don't want you to skip this step of having a mentor. Because mentoring literally means someone by your side, someone who's been on the journey, who knows the path, who knows where the dangers and the pitfalls are, and can get you from point A to point B in the best way possible. The reality of what we try to do here at Celebration Bar Review is literally to provide you with all the tools you need to dispel your doubts, to quell your fears, to give you strength and courage, to begin and complete your quest to succeed on this particular test. In other words, we take the idea and the responsibility of mentoring very seriously. It's not just saying, well, here are some outlines and here's some books, knock yourself out. There are people that do that. That's not what we do. We've got all the outlines, all the lectures, all the books, all the step-by-step, for sure. But really, we want to go beyond that. It's literally what we do through this podcast, through our webinars, through our community of support in our Facebook group, which is a private group for our students. It's through my live weekly video interactions with students doing Q&As. It is through the emails that I send. It is through the live video chats and conferences I do with students who sign up for that level of service. All of that is designed to give us the opportunity to provide and pour some insight, some wisdom, some experience, and some guidance into your situation. To give you the advice, the practical training, and the confidence that you need to be successful. And so that is step number 4 in the hero's journey, and I don't want you to skip over it. I don't want you to miss it. I know that some of you are going to take a big box bar review, and you're going to find yourself literally alone, even in the sea of people. When that happens, consider the possibility that mentoring really would make a difference for you. Reset your parameters. Think about what you're doing and why you want to do it. I will tell you without a doubt, when people come and see the way that we approach the exam versus what they did in the big box bar review, it is stunning to them and shocking. And the results bear that out. Well, once you've met a mentor, hopefully the right mentor, and you've accepted the call to adventure, the next step in the traditional hero's journey is called crossing the threshold. I love that imagery. Now, this is where you literally bring your studies to the front and you begin working through your work. You begin working through the preparation. For many people, it's both physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual. So there's a lot going on there for sure. It's all of those things. And for some of you, you go into it willingly, some with enthusiasm, but for many people, you might have to be pushed. Maybe you're really anxious. You didn't want to do this. You had those fears at the very beginning. You put it away. You picked it up. You put it away. Look, that's real life, and we know that. But here you are. Maybe you realize that you finally had to take the exam. You had to confront it after whatever period of time you've been away from it. Maybe your thought was, I don't want to have to take the exam, but if I want to keep practicing and I'm moving to someplace where I need to be, this is a reality and I've simply got to do it. In any event, you cross the threshold between what you know, the world that you're familiar with, and the world that you're not familiar with. And taking the bar is a world that most people, frankly, are not familiar with. Now, in the journey of the hero, this usually means having to leave home or doing some things that the hero was afraid to do. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for taking the bar exam. Look, if you've been in law school for 3 or 4 years, that's been home to you. I remember law school very fondly. I was used to doing it. I had a routine. It was a fun place to be in a weird, sick kind of way that only people that go on to be law professors probably find. But the point is, it was home. But now you have to do something new. If you've been in the practice of law for many years, you know that feeling. You know your work, you know your practice area, you're an expert in that area, but now you're going into an area that's something you don't know about. There are all of these subjects, many of which you haven't looked at for years, if ever. If you haven't practiced law at all, but maybe you went to law school and then you went out into the world, and now you, for whatever reason, want to or have to take the bar exam, then definitely in your case, there are fears and demons, what I call the snakes out there. Killing your own snake is now what you have to do. But the threshold presents itself to you as that barrier, that gap. And so what you have to do is to take the step over the threshold. And how does that happen? Well, you begin your studies. You take the first assignment. If you're in our course, you look at the syllabus and it's got step 1 and you do that and you check it off and you go, oh, and then you go to step 2 and you check that off and you go, okay, I can do this. And we keep building step after step after step. So the point is that when you take that first assignment, you listen to the first lecture, you send in the first piece of writing, or you write the first piece of writing, what you're doing is you're making the commitment to a journey. Now, you may not know at the beginning, and many of you are at the beginning if you're listening to this episode as we're releasing it. Many of you do not know where the journey is going to lead you or what's in store for you. And yet one of the amazing things to me is how much growth will occur for virtually everyone. Now, one of the things that we do is that when students conference with me, if they're in our personal or premium coaching course, we do all of the conferences on video and we record them and send the student the copy of the recording. But I also have a copy and I can go back and look at it, and I often do that. And one of the things that really stands out to me is to watch how the student's body language develops and changes over time. The initial conferences are often very stressful. They're anxious times for the student, and you can sense this fear of crossing the threshold, of moving into doing something new. I'm asking people to write in a different way than they did in their other work, or certainly in law school. I'm asking you to study in a different way. I'm suggesting a different way of reading if you're a photo reader. I'm showing you a different way to take questions and to put the material together. And that can be, as a whole, very, very frightening. Yet the successful heroes, the real heroes in our journey, are the people who put those fears to the side and they take one step at a time to just cross the threshold. What we call in our webinar really is a movement, just taking the next best step. And for many people, it's just moving one step at a time closer to their goal. But when you look at that development over time and you see the body language going from, oh, I'm so afraid and I'm fearful and I've got my arms crossed and I'm really, to open and excited and enthusiastic and I'm ready and I want to go take the exam. And then coming out of the exam and saying, you know what, I think I did it. I think I did the very best work I could do. And that's really a cool process to watch and to be part of. And for you, if you're just starting out, I can assure you it can happen. Now, going back to our hero's journey, once you've actually crossed the threshold, you've made the commitment, you've purchased a bar review, you've started your studies, you've done the first few assignments, you're going to be confronted with what's called tests allies, and enemies. Essentially, in the mythical journey, our heroes are presented with an ongoing set of subsequently more difficult series of challenges. There will be obstacles thrown in your way. Sometimes there will be physical hurdles. Sometimes it's just someone in your life who's determined to stymie your progress, and you have to overcome each challenge as it comes up, sort of like whack-a-mole. And let me just share with you a few of the challenges that our students have gone through as they prepare for the bar exam, because some of them are really remarkable. A few years ago, one of our students traveled from Florida to Puerto Rico to begin her final preparations for study. While she was in the airplane, she developed something called thrombosis. According to the doctors, apparently, she probably should have died on the airplane flying from Miami to San Juan. She got into San Juan. They immediately rushed her to the hospital. They did a series of tests, and they said, call your family. They started bringing the family around, and the doctors apparently told her family that she was not likely to survive, but she did, in fact, survive. I think that in itself was miraculous enough. But as the student tells the story, what happened was the doctors were telling her that she was in mortal danger, literally. She was crying, as you might expect. But the amazing part, she says, is that she wasn't crying because she thought she would die. Now get this. She was crying because she had studied and worked so hard, and she wanted to go to take the bar exam later that week. So through really nothing less than a miracle, over a period of about only 3 days, her body began to heal. And it healed enough that the doctors gave her a clean enough bill of health to fly back to Florida and to take the bar exam. Now, talk about an amazing obstacle to throw in your ways just a few days before the test. Another student lost a parent to Alzheimer's right before the exam. The parent was in horrible condition, but suddenly went into kidney failure, was rushed into hospice care, and passed away. Now, that kind of death in the family happens far more frequently than I want to tell any of you as you get underway with this. It's not that the bar exam causes death in the family, but somehow all of those normal events, regular events in the world, are magnified when you're taking the bar exam. And it's really horrible, obviously, in any circumstance, but right before a high-stakes test, it's about the worst possible time it could be. And it causes students to have to make a decision. Do you go forward? Do you stop? Do you grieve? Do you wait? What kind of obstacle do you have? And I can tell you that for some of you who are watching and listening right now, you will be faced with just that kind of obstacle, sadly enough. Another example that occurs more frequently than I'd like to tell you is that a student who was working and trying to prepare for the exam got a message from their fiancé that they were breaking up the engagement. This was literally just a week before the test. And getting that kind of message, I think, would be really hard at any time and cruel to get. I'm thinking about the famous Ari breakup on The Bachelor, just to date this this podcast. But it's just almost unthinkable to go through that. And yet, the student that I was thinking about, and it happens, as I say, more frequently than you would believe, they had to decide whether they are going to stop and deal with the relationship or deal with the bar exam and then come back and deal with the relationship. In other words, challenges will happen. Things will occur. Sometimes it's physical hurdles. Sometimes it's other people in your life. Sometimes it's the loss of someone that's important in your life. Now, those aren't the only kinds of challenges that come up. For some people, they run out of energy. They're just tired. They're cranky. Their kids get sick. There's too much to do. There's something that happens at work. There's a crisis somewhere in the world. There's politics and craziness. There's all kinds of frustration. And what do you do? Well, the point is that if you have the right basis and foundation, if you have followed the journey in the way that we've laid it out for you, you now have a foundational basis to make a decision about what to do next. Do you go on and take the exam or not? There is no right or wrong answer here. I simply want you to recognize that if you think, starting out today, that there will be no challenges in your way on the way to the bar exam, well, that happens to a lucky few, but it's only a few. Most people face some level of challenge, if not every day, at least frequently. And so when that happens, we at least view ourselves as an ally. To be a sounding board, to be a place where you can come and say, I'm not sure what to do, and to get trusted advice. And so it's important that you have friends and allies when the enemies arise. Now, as a Christian, I believe that the devil, the evil one, tries to put obstacles in our path. That's a personal theological belief of mine. You may not choose to have that belief. But even if you don't, I think you would recognize that there are clearly obstacles that can interrupt your ability to be focused and to do the work on the bar exam that you'll ultimately need to do. And you've got to be prepared for those hurdles and ordeals. They don't just happen the week before the exam. They will happen throughout your period of study. Perhaps you've already just gotten underway and you've already been hit with a hurdle or an obstacle. Get ready for it. It happens. You need to expect that they're going to occur. And every time your skills or your powers or your determination is tested, every obstacle that you encounter should help you gain a deeper insight into your own character. Who are you? What are you about? How important is this really? Now, the people that pass the bar exam, I have learned, are the people who take full responsibility for their own outcomes. They recognize that bad things can happen, but they don't let them stop them. It should help you become stronger and to learn more about yourself. That's the ultimately successful person. And throughout this process, I think you will find when you get ready to take the test, and even when the test is done, you can think back and look back and see what were your obstacles in your tests, what were your enemies, who were your enemies, and who were your allies. And when you get that perspective in mind, I think it changes everything that goes on. Now, that takes us through the first 6 steps of the hero's journey. There are 3 more steps leading up to the actual test itself, and I'm going to save those for a later episode when we get closer to the exam. But I wanted to really focus on this initial start, this starting point and getting underway. I wanted you to see this because I think once you understand that this is either what's going on for you right now or what it's going to happen to you over the next few weeks or months, knowing it ahead of time, recognizing that there is a universal truth to this journey that we all have to take, and in that sense we can all relate to it. Because we've probably all seen it and experienced it in different parts of our life, make it really powerful. And if you've never experienced it, well, at least you've seen it or read about it or gone to the movies. So I encourage you, among other things, to journal the experience, to make notes of the journey as you're going. Journal what you're doing. Keep records of what's happening, of how you're feeling. Use tools that we offer in our course like meditation and paraliminal recordings to help keep yourself grounded and focused and to be aware of what you're doing. Look for the right mentor. Look for someone who can walk you through this process, someone who can guide you, someone who can help you avoid the pitfalls along the way. And I'd be honored to be in that position. I hope that you'll consider Celebration Bar Review, but regardless of what you do, I want you to be aware that you don't have to go on the journey alone. Look, if you're just starting out and getting ready for the July 2018 exam or any exam coming up in the future, recognize that the steps that you have to take are well defined. They will happen. Whether you think you can skip them or not, yeah, you probably can't. And along the way, you will grow, you will develop, you will become a hero, a champion. And that's the really amazing part of the work that I get to do. I watch ordinary people turn into heroes almost right before my eyes, and it is an incredible blessing and challenge and joy to me and to our entire staff to see that happen. Well, that's our message for this week and our podcast. I hope that this is helpful for you. It's been great having you with us. Don't forget, this Thursday, March 29th, 7 p.m., our free webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. Make sure you get registered for that. I'll be on live to answer your questions and to tell you all about the 4 steps that successful bar takers take as they're on their hero's journey. So we'll take a deeper dive into all of that. And until then, and until next Wednesday, we'll see you. Have a great holiday week and weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.